Hi there. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for your mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. We also believe that as we go through life, we have to take the time to really kind of dive into our minds and to figure out what's going on inside of there. Because when we do that, we allow transformation. We allow ourselves to grow and become better. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is by listening to other people's stories and breakthroughs. And that's the idea behind what we're sharing here. For season 1, we're jumping into my journal from when I was 15 and pregnant. And we're having a lot of fun going through these entries and then breaking down the different things that I experienced. So we're going to jump into April 5th, 1994. Remember, I have no idea what I'm about to read. So it kind of adds that little bit of an element, and we just break it down as we go through. So here we go. April 5th. Today was a little better. Shelly, that's my sister, and her friend came to visit. My mom came too. Jesse is feeling better, except he still itches. He had an allergic reaction to his medicine for strep throat. So now we know he's allergic to sulfa and penicillin. My breasts hurt so bad, especially when I nursed Haley. They feel like they're going to explode. Today was one of those days that you cry for no reason. Jesse thought I was very weird. I guess he never has those days. I can't wait to stop using these bandages. This tape is killing me. Tomorrow, we go to the doctor and he'll take out my staples, so I won't have to worry about that anymore. I finally pooped today for the first time since May 31st. Last Thursday. Imagine that. Whew, I think a lot of ladies understand, especially mamas, people who have given birth, and also even people who have just had basic operations understand. I finally pooped today. Oh, those are sometimes can be scary moments. I remember, this is so random. I don't know why I feel like I need to share this information. But I remember having just a basic operation in my mouth, 10 years ago or so. And I remember the doctor forgot to give me laxatives. And I seriously felt like I was having a poop baby in the bathroom the first time that I pooped after an operation. So I guess just a little sideways tip. You never know what you're going to get here. But just that feeling. And I thought it was so funny when I said, I guess he never has those days. Every single girl gets, men are so different and women are so different. That's one of the things that I think is so key and important in life is that when you are female or when you're male, making a bit of a study of the opposite sex of you is extremely valuable. Because for me, I was relating to him like he had the same types of emotions as I do. And girls just have a lot more hormones and a lot more going on in that arena than the typical male, especially females that have just given birth. Holy moly. It's just one of those days that you cry for no reason. And I think it's interesting that I report that my breasts hurt so bad because every single time that I have nursed my babies, I have really had a go for weeks before it kind of became comfortable. And I thought this was really interesting because looking back, without reading my journal, looking back on my experience with Taylor, my little girl, I honestly remembered, it was so smooth sailing. I didn't have any problems breastfeeding. And then all 3 of my boys they weren't really problems. It was just really, really hard for all of that to toughen up and like kind of feel like, ready. And so I guess I have such a wide variety of people who listen to this podcast. I have, teenagers all the way to seasoned adults and moms that have lots of babies. For the teenagers, for anybody who hasn't had babies yet, it's worth it. It is so worth it to nurse. And yes, there are some pains that you go through in the beginning and all kinds of adjustments, and every single baby is different. But those couple of weeks of pain, and I'm telling you pain, sometimes I had to nurse my babies. You have those little bumbo pillows, and sometimes I had to nurse my babies and just rest the baby on the pillow and make my hands be kind of free of the baby because I knew it was going to hurt so bad. And then I could just relax after that. But everything I feel like ever since I've had babies, there's all kinds of new stuff always coming out. New methods, new products, new mindsets around all of this type of thing. So always look for all of your resources. I don't know why that was such a side note for this, but sometimes I feel like if we report on how bad it is, then we also sort of have to report on all of the good, or else we're just really putting discouragement out into the world. It's interesting. I love the story of this woman. It's actually a poem, and this woman is standing in a wedding line, and she's about to greet the bride and the groom, and in her head, she starts having this conversation with herself. And she's saying, gosh, like when I hug her, should I tell her what she's in for? Should I tell her about, and she goes through a list of things. And I remember one of the things was, should I tell her about that upside down peanut butter sandwich on the floor today? That was open face, landed with the splatter of all of the jelly and the peanut butter everywhere. Should I tell her about that? And she went through the list of all of the things that were really hard for her in just that day. Because this woman was raising a family with young kids. And she thought in her mind, no. Because I can't describe to her the way that it feels when. And she went into all of the sweet things from her day. The way that my husband passes me. Because one of the things that, was on her list of hard was that, how busy her husband was and how much she didn't see him. And she said no, because the sweetness that I can't describe is the way that I feel when my husband, passes me in the hall at church. Or I can't describe the way that it feels to have your heart overflowing because you're serving this young person. It's so hard to describe that. And so if I describe the hard, I need to describe the good. And I feel like that as I'm saying that. If we're going to describe how hard, if I'm going to tell you how hard nursing was, it's almost like I have to tell you what a bond it is with your baby. How incredible it is to feel that connection and that closeness. How incredible the human body is that the woman's, areola collects information from the baby's saliva to craft the right vitamins and nutrients into that breast milk that baby needs to grow. How amazing the science is behind that. So there you go. If I'm going to tell you the bad, I'm going to tell you the good too. And then I think also that it's just such a testament that sometimes we go through the bad, and the bad is so momentary compared to the good, right? So in the beginning, if my breasts hurt, it's a very personal topic. But if in the beginning that's what happens, then guess what? The rest of the however long that I was breastfeeding for, that was all really amazing. And so sometimes I think when the good outweighs the bad, And that is just so descriptive of our life. That when the good outweighs the bad, what do we remember? You know, they say that when somebody comes to your house, if you have a good interaction when you first, like let's say it's a family event, and this is perfect, right? Because holidays are coming up. When somebody comes to your house, your family or whatever, and you have a really good interaction when they come and it's happy, they could come in and there might be even a family fight or an explosion or something that happens. But if you leave also hugging and on good terms, what you're going to remember is the good. So isn't that interesting that as we go through our life, just to remember that the hiccups will come, the lows from the highs from the roller coaster. We're going to have highs, we're going to have lows, but we're going to remember the highs more than we are the lows. If that's what we begin, that's what we end with, or if that's what we have more of, then that's what we'll remember. I think that's kind of a beautiful analogy. Let's read the next entry as well, April 6th. Well, the doctor said everything is fine. Taylor weighs 6 pounds now, and she's 6 days old. And the cutest girl I've ever seen. He took out all the staples and put those strips of tape about this big. I drew a little strip of tape. It's probably 1.5 inches long with lines that go vertical and horizontal, lots of them making this tiny little grid. He put these strips of tape that were about this big on me, and they don't even bother me. I'm so happy that I don't have to do the bandage thing anymore. Jesse's dad came and visited last night, and he left this morning. He was amazed by Taylor. Today when we were fixing dinner, I was so hyper. I haven't been that hyper for a long time. I wish Jesse could just stop smoking. I can't see any way that it could be good. It stinks, it costs, and it even makes him look grody when he does it. Well, he's trying. Parentheses, I think. I should give him credit for that, shouldn't I? I love him so much. I hate to think of how bad he could hurt me. Ooh, there is so much to unpack in just those last few sentences. So first, I just want to focus on Taylor for a minute because I just love how I'm writing, she's the cutest girl. And she really did have certain characteristics about her that she had really defined features for a little baby. And we'll get into in future episodes how it just really felt like when she looked at you, it felt like she was like looking into your soul. So I really do believe that there was something special about that little girl. And I don't know, that just helps me knowing the role that she is in my life right now, really looking out for me on the other side, sort of as a personal guardian angel. Another comment that is just kind of like a get to know you type of a thing is that I think it's funny when I said, when we were fixing dinner tonight, I was so hyper. I haven't been that hyper for a long time. And I've always just had this tons of energy in my soul and in my gut and excitement to live life. So I actually like that I wrote that I felt that way, that I felt that excitement. Some of the things that I wrote that are complete red flags to me and that actually make me really grateful that I'm on the other side of this at this point in my life have to do with the red flags of trust, of husbands and wives being able to talk about where they're at with all things in life and be open about those things and how important I think that is. And also I want to talk a bit about codependency and interdependency and just kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So let's start with where I'm talking about his smoking. the first thing is, I think it's so interesting that where I said it stinks, it costs, and the way that it makes him look, that it makes him look grody, which is a funny word. But I think it's funny that I didn't even say anything about his health, because that's the first sort of red flag for me where I'm at in my life right now, is the way that would affect his health. But my spirit knew that it wasn't good for him, right? Based on all of the other things that I listed. And I think I probably still knew that it wasn't good for his health, but obviously that wasn't maybe number one on my list. One of the things that I feel like is really great relationship advice, whether, you've been married for a really long time, or especially like for newlyweds, I think that one of the things that can help your relationship so much is being willing to address what's in front of you. And I cannot tell you how many people just sort of sweep things like this under the rug. Just pay attention to your gut. And if something feels sticky to you, it's because it is. And you can't be afraid to confront that with this person who's supposed to be your person. Take care of it. Sweep up the mess and make sure that it stays clean, because things are going to come up, and whether they're on the scale of really big things or if they're really tiny things, it's irrelevant. It's just knowing that you can always talk about and clear the air with your person is such a sign of health. I have so many friends who've said things like, I knew it and I didn't want to do anything about it. And I'll tell you, as we continue on this journey, that also happened to me. That had I addressed things that were red flags, I don't know, things might have happened sooner. Things that happen, I don't want to spoil the story. Obviously, you can tell that I'm married to a different person now. I'll tell you a little story about my current husband. My current husband, Jake, and I went through a period of time where every single week we kind of went through a list of questions talking about, this was just such a fun and really healthy thing to do. Every single Sunday, we sat down and kind of said, okay, what are the great things from our week? What are the things that we can see that were blessings for us? And we just kind of went through like a little bit of an inventory, talking about what ways can I pray for you this week? Or what are you dreaming about? Just so that I know what your dreams are about. Those kinds of questions. And one of the questions on that list was, is there any unconfessed sin, conflict, or hurt that we need to resolve or ask forgiveness for? And we had this little journal, and we write down our answers, because it's such a huge thing to talk about and actually record what joys you're seeing, what blessings you're seeing, that type of thing. But we would kind of keep track. And I remember having a conversation with a friend who I was telling about this, because it was really I was finding a lot of fulfillment and joy from this practice that we were doing. And my friend, when I got to question 4, and I said, all of the things, any unconfessed sin or hurts, things we need to resolve or ask forgiveness for, I remember she was like, whoa, whoa, as though that felt too invasive. And I have a lot to say around that, because you might have to work to get to that point, to that place in your relationship where you could ask that question, where you would feel safe enough to hear the other person's answer, and where they hold you with respect in a way that they can say something knowing that you're going to also receive it because you respect their feelings. There's so much about that across the board. But ultimately, in a healthy relationship, that's a question that you should be able to ask, and that your partner should be able to answer honestly, and that you can receive that and hold that, and you can be the kind of person that looks at it and says, wow, I do need to work on that. And that's okay, because it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or that I don't have all these other great traits. Right? So there's a huge level of vulnerability and safety that really exists in a super healthy relationship that I can see was not present in my previous relationship. And the next thing I want to talk about is where I said I love him so much and I hate to think of how much he could hurt me. Because for me, I just see that as such a huge red flag. Because I don't think of my current husband like how much he could hurt me. I think about like how blessed I am to have him with me. And if something were to ever happen to him, then that would hurt me. But I don't go around thinking that maybe he will hurt me. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, remember when, I remember as a little girl, I don't know if you did this too, but I remember sitting there with, a little flower or whatever, and you pick off the petals and you say, he loves me not. He loves me not. And whichever one you end on, you're like, oh, he loves me. Yay. Or like if he doesn't, he loves me not. And you're like, oh, bummer. And there's just such an underlying tone in that exercise that somehow the love and the coming together isn't necessarily a mutual thing. It's like, if you love me, I'll be at your beck and call. Or, that's just kind of how I interpret it in my mind. And maybe that's kind of a little bit extreme, but he loves me not, and then I'm rejected and sad. But true love is mutual, right? It's a coming together. And I'm in a spot in my life where I can sit and say the contrast to my current husband. And I think there's always things in every single relationship that we always have to work on. But I don't sit and think of the ways that he could hurt me because of the way that I know that we have trust in our relationship. So diving into the conversation about relationships, I think it's really important to understand, and kind of go into our mind and see where our relationship is at so that we understand that there's also steps that we can take to make it better, to improve. We're not stuck in anything. And I think that that's sort of the freedom in this story. Obviously, I'm not with this person anymore. And if you continue to work and to show up and it's not working, there are other options. And it also gives us the perspective of how we can be the best person that we can be going into a relationship. So let's talk about dependency, codependency, interdependency. And I'm going to break that down for you so that you understand in a really simple way what that is and how that can apply to you, and how in your mind, if you understand where you are at on that level, you can also understand what you can do to improve or to know that wherever you're at is not finality, and it's okay. So I remember in college learning about, codependency and interdependency. And I remember learning about this sort of scale of dependency. So when we're born and as we mature through our life, so when we're born, we're super dependent. We depend for our existence on other people. And then as we grow, we become independent. And we start to learn how we can do everything for ourselves and take care of ourselves. And then when we move into maturity, we understand what interdependence is. Being interdependent is being responsible for yourself, but having the choice to be connected to others. And understanding that when we're connected to others, it actually makes us a better person. But knowing that ultimately we're still responsible for our own feelings and our own emotions and actions. But we still have that supportive connection in our life, and we reach out and we help when we're able. And that's kind of the basic look at what interdependence is and how that's kind of like the healthy standpoint. And then we have codependence. And in general, in codependence, people rely on their partner to give them the reassurance that they need to feel good. Like we need them to tell us that we're beautiful, or we need them to tell us that they love us so that we feel secure. We need them to be available all the time so that they can meet our needs. I love what Covey said. He said, interdependence is a choice that only independent people can make. Do you see how we have to be independent and able to take care of ourselves to make the choice to become interdependent, to be fused with another person? And in codependency, you need your partner. In interdependence, you want your partner. So there's a big difference. When we rely on somebody else to take care of our basic needs, it's unhealthy. And so looking at your own relationship and seeing where you land on that spectrum is incredibly important, because you can also take steps to becoming an interdependent person and or relationship, which will increase your level of health and your relativeness to each other. So then there's something else that's called the dependency paradox. This is the best way that I can describe this is like, because we have the support that we have, we can go out into the world even more confidently. And that is a really beautiful thing, right? So that we can, because we're choosing that dependency, and we know that we can kind of fall back on some people. It's kind of like how my son came home yesterday from school, and there had been like some rumors of not rumors. There was really a kid that went in the bathroom stalls and wrote some things on the walls, and it included like some bad words. And oh, his heart when he came in and told me, Mom, they took us in a room because they have security cameras. And so everybody that, walked into that stall, they had come in, and they're trying to see if it was me, Mom. And I don't even say those words, and I don't write those words. And he's like, all of this, like, he's worried about it. And like a mom heart, sometimes you can kind of know, your kid, and you know where they're at with that. Sometimes we have to kind of read between the lines and be like, are you sure? But I really trusted him and believed him. And I was able to help him see, look, honey, it doesn't matter what anybody else says about you. And it doesn't matter what the whole grade might think. It doesn't matter. If your core people trust you and know that you're telling the truth, you can still go through life confidently. And if you struggle even in that arena, then it gets even smaller. The circle gets even smaller. And it's like, if you know, and if your God knows that you're telling the truth, then you can still walk with your head high. You don't need to worry about what everybody else is saying about you. So I love that in relation to the dependency paradox. But I think it's really important to kind of take a look at these different definitions of being interdependent or being codependent. Because there's steps that we can take towards being more healthy. So a small list of things that codependence is or shows up as is like poor or no boundaries, people-pleasing behaviors, reactivity, unhealthy or ineffective communication, manipulation, which my old relationship was just full of. Difficulty with emotional intimacy, controlling behaviors, blaming each other, low self-esteem in one or both partners, and no personal interests or goals outside of the relationship. And if you take a look at the interdependent characteristics, then you can understand the steps that you can take towards becoming that and what you can work on in your own life. Healthy boundaries, active listening, time for personal interests, clear communication, taking responsibilities for behaviors, creating safety for each other to be vulnerable, engaging and responding to each other, a healthy self-esteem, being open and approachable with each other, I think if we don't sit down and actually think about it and even get feedback from our partner about how they feel, about how approachable we are, we might not ever see it. We might not ever see that we're a bit defensive. We might not ever see that when someone approaches us, we actually just deflect and we try to blame something else, something on them or on someone else or whatever. If we don't sit in it and take that mindset check. Becoming interdependent doesn't occur overnight. It takes an incredible amount of courage to be honest with yourself and face the fears you've been trying to ignore. And it takes even more courage to relearn new patterns. It takes a ton of courage for someone to say, hey, this hurt, and for you to say, gosh, I'm sorry. But when we do that, we open up entire new possibilities and ways of being just because we're choosing a better habit, a better way. This is a little short story about interdependence. A young girl and her father were walking along a forest path. At some point, they came across a large tree branch on the ground in front of them. The girl asked her father, if I try, do you think I could move that branch? Her father replied, I'm sure you can, if you use all your strength. The girl tried her best to lift or push the branch, but she was not so strong enough, and she couldn't move it. She said with disappointment, You're wrong, Dad. I can't move it. He said, Try again with all your strength. Again, the girl tried to push the branch. She struggled, but it did not move. Dad, I can't do it, said the girl. Finally, her father said, Young lady, I advise you to use all your strength. You didn't. You didn't ask for my help. I love the glimpse that gives us into interdependence. That we try to do it, and when we can't, we know we can ask for assistance. But of course, we don't act like a queen and be like, move that branch for me, right? So there's so many different parts of that you can break down, whatever kind of came up for you as we walk through some of that. And if you're not in a relationship, you can kind of look at what came up for you anyway. Like, what has come up for you in past relationships, and what does that look like? Or even relationships with like familial relationships or relationships with friends. In what ways did any of those things come up for you? And what is it that you can take a mindset check about and go, I can be better at that. I can be better at that, because that's empowerment. Sitting in it and staying in it and sweeping it under the rug, covering it up, there's no power in that. We have a charge to become our best selves, to become the very best that we can be, because when we can become that, that's when we can really have breakthroughs, live a life that we love, and serve others. So take courage from me, from knowing that I had one situation and now have a vastly different situation. And even in my current situation, I have had to sit in moments where I was courageous a lot of times, where I had to kind of humble myself because I have a really strong personality, and I still am learning all of the time things that I need to do to improve myself, little things. Even as I was telling you that list of things came up, right? Of things that I can work on. I love President Roosevelt. He said, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. And I remember Jake's aunt and uncle, really incredible people. and his uncle passed away. He had a brain tumor, and it was at his funeral, and I didn't get to go to it. And he came home. My husband came home, and I said, "Tell me about the funeral. How did it go?" And he said that his Aunt Donna got up and said the words, "Let me tell you what it was like to be his spouse." And that is something that has stuck with me forever. Like, if somebody stands up at your funeral and says, "Let me tell you what it was like to be their spouse," what comes after that? Fill in the blank of what comes after that. Because Aunt Donna went into a lot of incredible things about Uncle Trent. And that's what we have the power to be. By just taking a mindset check. By constantly assessing ourselves and having a desire to step into power because we make choices that might be hard. I love this quote by Steve Marable. It said, "The value of a moment is immeasurable. The power of just one moment can propel you to success and happiness, or chain you to failure and misery." So think about that the next time that you have to swallow a jagged pill. The next time that you have to recognize what's in your partner's heart, or be approachable, or say, "I'm sorry," or "I was wrong," or the next time that you need to pursue your own interests so that you can lift your own confidence levels, or the next time that you need to create safety or a soft landing place for your spouse. I'm hoping that this mindset check brings you freedom and power. Because trust me, it's so much better when you find yourself on the other side of swallowing that jagged pill. I hope you're loving this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. And if you have any comments, we would love to hear from you. You can send an email to hello@myfriendmisha.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at myfriendmisha. And you can just follow along on Instagram because we talk about things on the podcast and we talk about all kinds of things mindset, and you get to know me a little bit more personally in my current life, not just my 15-year-old self. Also, this podcast can grow with your help. It would really mean a lot to me if you share it, as we're trying to really get off the ground and gain a lot of momentum. I would really appreciate that. And one more thing, if you want to support this podcast in moving forward, and you're on Amazon anyway, buying, I don't know, everything in your life, from all of the supplies for the holidays to the gifts for the holidays and all of that jazz, and even just the basics, hey, if you could just do it through my link, then I'll get a kickback. That's how affiliate links work. It doesn't charge you money. It just gives me a kickback. It's like saying thank you. So when you shop, instead of typing in Amazon.com, it's as easy and as simple as typing in Amazon.com/shop/myfriendmisha. Thank you so much for being brave enough to walk through the things that we talked about today. I know that those things are close to home for every single person, and it does take a lot of courage to walk through that. So thank you for showing up in that space with me today. And remember that as you take time for a mindset check, you find that you have more power than you think you do. Until next time, my friend.